Well, you're watching Global Mirror, and today, of course, we will be talking about the talks that happened in Saudi Arabia. As American and Russian officials met in Saudi Arabia with an aim to end the war, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy postponed his visit to Saudi Arabia because he was displeased with being omitted from the meeting and that the talks were held behind Ukraine's back. Zelensky's decision comes amid President Donald Trump blaming him for the conflict. Now, remember, the Ukrainian president has responded to Trump's allegations as well, saying that he lives in disinformation space and a Russian disinformation space. But also remember, Zelensky's decision comes amid President Donald Trump blaming him for the conflict. He, in fact, took a jibe at Zelenskyy for having just 4% approval ratings and for being a grossly incompetent leader.
It's a war that would have never happened if I was president, and I've been watching these people being killed at levels that you've rarely seen, not even close, since the Second World War. And I'm very disappointed. I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives, and without the loss of cities that are just laying on their side.
Now, the Ukrainian president has responded to Donald Trump's allegations, saying that he lives in a Russian disinformation space. Nearly 3 years since the war began, United States has now outlined what it calls the next steps in the war. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the plan involves the normalization of diplomatic activity between US and Russia, engagement on Ukraine, and exploring mutual opportunities when the war ends. Blasting the Biden administration and Zelenskyy and reiterating his earlier stance, Donald Trump said that the half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives.
And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way.
Remember, neither Ukraine nor European nations were invited to the Riyadh talks, with many raising concerns about the one-sidedness of the meeting.
Те, що вони обговорюють в Саудівській Аравії свої двосторонні питання, я говорив, це їх право. Хоча я вважаю, що Сполучені Штати Америки допомогли Путіну вийти із багатолітньої ізоляції. І через абсолютно справедливе повномасштабне вторгнення. І ніхто не роздратований. Дивіться, ми до всього готові. І історія про те, що 90% всієї допомоги – це Сполучені Штати. Ми з вами розуміємо, що правда вона трішки інша, хоча, безумовно, ми вдячні за допомогу. І тому я би хотів, щоб було більше правди у команди Трампа. Бо все це впливає точно на... точно не позитивно на Україну не впливає, а впливає на те, що вони виводять із ізоляції Путіна.
However, here's what Marco Rubio said, and I quote him, "No one is being sidelined. Obviously, there's going to be engagement and consultation with Ukraine, with our partners in Europe and others. But ultimately, the Russian side will be indispensable to this effort," unquote. Now, even as negotiations continue, all eyes are on the big Trump-Putin meeting. And if it does happen in Washington, D.C., it would be a picture for the history books because Putin, remember, has been termed as a war criminal by the Biden administration. The question that arises now is, will the Russia-Ukraine war end in 2025? Let me introduce my panel today on Global Mirror. Mr. Anil Trigunayat, former ambassador, is joining us. Ruslan Bortnik, Ukrainian political analyst, is joining us. We're also expecting Fred Wire, Russian journalist, to join us in a short while from now. Good evening and namaskar to you. Ruslan, let me start with you. How are you seeing the talks? Clearly, Volodymyr Zelenskyy is miffed with US for not including Ukraine in these talks. But the fact of the matter is that in the past, whatever peace talks have happened, Russia was never part of those talks. So what locus standi does Ukraine have to protest against them being omitted from this meeting?
Hello, colleagues. The problem is not only that Ukraine was not invited to the talks in Saudi Arabia. The problem is that Ukrainian interests were not taken into account during this negotiation process. And so this pushed Ukraine to the protest against negotiation, and it worsening the relations between Ukraine and the United States, between Zelenskyy and Trump. We see it clearly. Talking in general about the negotiation process, of course, we had a few weeks of preparation for that negotiation when Trump and his team was trying to improve the public image of the Russian Federation in the Western world. Then we had with the stage in Saudi Arabia, a negotiation when the sides made the agreement to prepare the infrastructure for the future negotiation. I am talking about the reopening the embassies, charging the ambassadors, and so on and so on. It looks like the United States and Russia took a very high speed to find a solution, maybe till the beginning of the spring even, and to finish this conflict as fast as is possible, because the term which Trump has, it's his honeymoon, is also very short.
But Ruslan, shouldn't that come as a relief for Ukraine, the fact that the US is negotiating and talking with Russia and moving towards what they would like to call peace?
We don't know exactly. It looks like now United States is trying to find agreement with Russia, not only for Ukraine, but also a wide variety of topics, of geopolitical topics. And it looks like this agreement could make a significant influence on the Ukrainian political system and leads us to changing the government, changing the president. And of course, Ukrainian elites are not ready and they are not supporting such a scenario.
Okay. Ambassador Trigunath, you want to comment on this? How are you viewing these entire talks? Of course, there is a lot of criticism coming Donald Trump's way, but there are supporters as well saying that, you know, finally we have somebody who's trying to negotiate between the two parties, and he started with Russia. He's going to meet Putin within, perhaps the next 8 to 10 days. And he will talk to Volodymyr Zelenskyy as well. In fact, Trump has given that offer as well. You give us $500 billion of your mineral wealth if you want peace.
Well, I think that Trump has spoken to President Zelensky. That's not there. But let's go back a little bit, what Trump has been saying and the clips that you have played. If you remember early on in March, April, there were negotiations between Ukraine and Russia directly in Istanbul. And at those negotiations, the world was very hopeful, as President Zelensky had clearly himself stated that he is not going to join NATO, and that they had agreed to some kind of an arrangement. And it was early days of that war. And at that time, I believe the Russians had also agreed that if Ukraine wished to join the European Union, they will have no objection. But when they came back and they spoke to Boris Johnson and Biden, then the Boris Johnson clearly mentioned that we will defeat Russia. Now, from then on, we have seen the mayhem that has been caused here. Now, Trump, all through these 4 years, has been talking when he's been out of power that if he was, somehow he feels that he has a magic wand, that if he was in power, this war would not have started. And he could end it in a day. It is not going to end in a day. They are very complex things. And of course, they need to talk to the Ukrainians because they are the affected party. So Russia, Ukraine, and US together can do it. I have always held the belief that it is the United States which can play a constructive role if it wishes to, which it has not in the past. So they do their own geopolitics. And in that process, other nations get caught and get mauled in. That's the biggest problem that one sees it. So if somehow they are able to sort out this war and where the general principles are adhered to, then it is good for the world. But it's not going to be easy. The problem is that now Trump has started also talking about that President Zelensky has just 4% ratings, that there should be elections and all. So obviously, when he's talking of change of government here, then you will have greater
Yeah.
opposition from President Zelensky and his people. I mean, that is obvious. There is nothing unnatural about it. So we are in for a bit of a difficulty, but as you know, that as far as NATO is concerned or the security is concerned, nearly 47 to 48% of it is provided by the United States, which it no longer is willing to provide or
Sure.
contribute to. So therefore, the Europeans are also not in a position to support, even though they might make claims or statements, but I doubt very much that they will be able to support Ukraine to the point where it can continue to fight the Russians for long.
You know, Ruslan, we just had Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary of America, uh, have his statement on Ukraine, where he said, and I quote him, returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. Chasing this illusionary goal will only prolong the war and increase suffering. That comes as a huge setback. It's almost like what many are saying is an end of Ukraine because it leaves Ukraine with no choice.
We have all the time we have choice, of course, but we have a good choice and bad choice. And of course, Ukraine is not able to continue this large-scale war during a long time without United States support. But the previous United States administration, Biden's administration, made a storage of a weapon for Ukraine and for financing for Ukraine for the next 6-9 months. And moreover, European partners of Ukraine, especially France and Great Britain, are ready to continue and even to increase the support of Ukraine. So Ukraine has some time, and the Ukrainian government is willing to use this time to just to wait what will be going on with Trump. Trump, it's like a storm, which is very brutal but could be very short, because Trump faced with a lot of internal problem in the United States. And the Ukrainian strategy is to wait. Of course, if we are talking from society and expert side, from the first days of the war, I'm standing for the ending of this war. We need a peace agreement. We need a stable peace agreement, long-term peace agreement. Without which the restoration of the country and backing the people is impossible. But politicians
But Ruslan,
made
you know,
a
the point of
very
the
brutal.
matter is that Ukraine,
What?
you also wanted a NATO membership. You've had an entire war for over 3 years now, yet Ukraine doesn't have a NATO membership.
Yeah, and I think, and I will be thinking that it's not a real goal. NATO membership of Ukraine is not a real goal. Security guarantees it could be, but NATO membership not. I think it was a political goal for politicians to mobilize the people, to give them hope, but it wasn't not a real goal, unfortunately. But Ukrainian were not fighting. We are not fighting for the NATO. Ukrainians were fighting against Russia, against the Russian intervention to Ukrainian lands.
Okay. Let me also welcome Nikita Menkovich, director of the Eurasian Analytical Club, to this conversation. Nikita, a lot of critics are saying that Russia and US are doing a one-sided talk and that leaving out Ukraine and European allies of America means that you're just going to go with Russian side, Russian demands, and that you're not going to be considering at all what Ukraine demands from this entire conflict.
Hello. First of all, we should divide interests of Ukraine and Ukrainians and interests of the Kiev regime. Kiev regime does not represent Ukrainian people at all. So we have no need to invite these people from occupied Kiev to discuss the future of Russian and American relations. We understand that Kiev-controlled territory is American colony. It is not independent state. it's not economically or military independent. It is controlled from Washington, and of course, Russia and United States discuss what is going to be later. Is Trump ready to give freedom and independence to Ukrainian people, to give them a choice to build their own state or rejoin Russia? Or he's going to continue fight against Ukrainian people and Russia? That is the situation. We should forget about all these talks about President Zelenskyy. He's not a president, he's an actor who pretends to be a leader. He is a British citizen. What for he should be invited to talk about future of Ukraine? He can go to his favorite London and stay there. It is not his business. We, Russian and Ukrainian people, want to be free. We are fighting for our freedom. And we're glad that Mr. Trump is ready to finish this war against us, that he is ready, I hope, to give us
what Donald Trump has offered Ukraine. He has said, you either give us $500 billion of your mineral wealth in a defined time period, or you become part of Russia. Is that a fair offer to give to Ukraine when it has lost thousands of its own soldiers and own people fighting a conflict, and when they have their own demands from Russia as well?
At first, as I said, please do not call Kiev regime Ukraine. It is not a country. It is not people. Ukrainian people are part of Russian army fighting to liberate those cities from American occupation. These are Ukrainians. Mr. Zelenskyy and other American mercenaries are not Ukrainians. They're representatives of Mr. Trump. And Mr. Trump, of course, wants his money back. He's a businessman. He put some money in Ukrainian project. United States hoped that they will manage to combat Ukrainian and Russian people, to make Ukraine and Russia too as American colony, but they failed. We're still fighting for our freedom, and United States are losing. So Mr. Trump see, it was a Biden mistake. It was failed war. And now he is ready to talk. He is going to talk with leader of Russian and Ukrainian people, Mr. Putin, leader of our two nations. He is going to talk about future of this land. That is the topic.
Okay, Ambassador Trigunayat, with Donald Trump talking to Russia directly, there are also, of course, talks that he will be talking with the Ukrainian side as well. Do you see the European role at all now, considering the fact that until the Biden administration was there was a clear European role? European allies of the US had a certain role as far as military equipment, financial aid is concerned, and even diplomatic channels being used for this entire conflict is concerned. Now, do you see Donald Trump completely rejecting the European role in this?
No, I don't think that he's completely rejecting, but he thinks that the Europeans and the Biden administration, which completely discards and accuses them of conflating this war, that's his viewpoint, which he has been always saying it. And so therefore, he does not consider that the Europeans need to be on the table for talking. But definitely, I'm quite sure that he's keen on United States, Russia, and Ukraine sitting together on the table and working out the details of the peace plan, how it is going to be. I think that this is the first thing, is ceasefire. But the current meeting that happened now, basically in Riyadh, was an important step for the Russians in a way, because then the Russians and Russians and American diplomats and the foreign ministers met face to face, discussed various issues, and have agreed to re-establish the diplomatic relationship to the same level as it was, as well as work on the economic engagement. Because, as you know, the Russia suffers from the highest numbers of sanctions. And thirdly is to find some kind of come up with some kind of a plan or work out a charter whereby the discussions can be held. But in the process, Russia will have its own side of the story. Ukrainians will have their own side of the story. And since Russians always felt that this is not a war with Ukraine, but this is a war with the West, especially the United States, at least until the Biden administration. And that particular point has come to a stop after January 20th. So Trump wants to deliver on this, but we'll have to see how it eventually plays out. No doubt at the moment, the Americans feel that they can wrangle some kind of a ceasefire.
There's also a strong message, Ambassador Trigunayat, that the US is giving out, not just with these talks, but the fact that they are carrying out a Kodomo 2025, which is a naval exercise between US and Russia. With such practices coming to the fore now, there's also a message, of course, being sent out that Russia is no more isolated, that the sanctions that were slammed against Russia shouldn't have been slapped in the first place, and that, how Donald Trump has blamed Volodymyr Zelenskyy for this entire conflict taking place. So a very strong message of this US-Russia partnership also coming to the fore.
Yes, definitely. I mean, Trump, in fact, believes, and it is also, again, a broader geopolitical game plan. It is not something that which, to some extent, President Biden thought it in a very different manner. But in the first term, also, if you remember, that President Trump wanted to have good relations or at least some kind of a modus vivendi with Putin and Russia so that they could somehow contain China's rise. I mean, that is their biggest challenge in the Indo-Pacific, which the U.S. Strategy makers do think about it. So I believe that this is what precisely he's trying to do. And he thinks that Russia has been wronged in this. Because, see, if you go back a little bit while earlier, the only thing Russia had been asking throughout some kind of a guarantees from the Americans. And when in Geneva, the Putin and Biden had met, I mean, I personally feel it was very naive to ask from the United States for any written guarantees because they are the ones who go out of any agreement so quickly that it is anybody's guess. So this was very naive. But at the same time, this is what they were asking for, and they didn't get it. And then eventually, we have seen what has happened for the 3 years of mayhem on all sides. So I hope that they can find some way which is genuine and which is, of course, can bring about peace in the region because the whole world is suffering from the impact of this war.
Sure. Ruslan, you want to come in on how Donald Trump has called for an election in Ukraine? He's completely negated the importance of Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and he said that he should be going and he should have gone sooner.
It's for me question?
Yes, Ruslan, this is for you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a tactic of influence, of push for Zelenskyy, because Zelenskyy now resists towards the interest and towards the initiatives of the Donald Trump. So these statements and claims on the low ratings of Zelenskyy or on the corrupted state of Ukraine and so on, it's a question of influence and push from Trump to Zelenskyy. In this way, Trump is trying to make Zelenskyy very behavior, to push him to sign any agreement, any initiatives which United States now is proposing for Ukraine. In other way, Trump is trying to danger for Zelenskyy possible election, which Zelenskyy may not win in the future. So it's a tactic, but you need to understand it's a very, very business tactic. It means that before the agreement, before the signature on the agreement, you can do everything. You can say everything. You can make a pressure for a family. You can call the militaries. You can make a disinformation company. But when you sign the contract, everything is covered up and everything is forgotten. So it's a tactics, I think, of influence to Zelenskyy.
Okay, we'll have to see whether it's a tactic or an action that Donald Trump and United States of America will implement. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much to all of you gentlemen, Ambassador Trigunayat, Ruslan and Nikita, for joining us and sharing your perspective on Global Mirror. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it's a wrap on this broadcast.